You ever look at someone successful and just feel stuck? Like you're doing everything right. You're putting in the work, staying up late, reading the books, grinding every day, but somehow other people seem to fly past you like they're playing a different game entirely. And you start wondering, is it me? Am I missing something? Here's the truth most people don't talk about. Long-term success isn't just about hard work or talent. There are hidden patterns, invisible advantages, unspoken rules that shape who gets ahead and who gets left behind. This video breaks down the biggest insights from Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, not as a book summary, but as a real-world success cheat sheet you can actually use. Because some people really do get lucky. But once you understand the patterns behind their success, you can start creating your own. Lesson 1, the Matthew Effect. Okay, so let's kick things off with a concept that honestly blew my mind when I first read about it, the Matthew Effect. It comes from a Bible verse that basically says, "To those who have, more will be given, and from those who have not, even what they have will be taken away." It's not just about big moments or once-in-a-lifetime breakthroughs, it's about tiny early advantages that snowball into something massive over time. Let me give you an example that Gladwell shares in the book. Canadian hockey players. Now, you'd think the best young hockey players in Canada are just naturally talented, right? But if you look at the birthdays of elite players, there's a weird pattern. Most of them are born in January, February, or March. Why? It's because of how the youth hockey leagues are set up. The age cutoff is January 1st. So a kid born on January 2nd is grouped in with kids born all the way through December. That means, from age 5 or 6, they're almost a full year older, taller, stronger, more coordinated. And because they look a little better early on, they get picked for better teams, better coaching, and extra practice. And that slight edge just keeps compounding year after year, until they're playing professionally. It's not just hockey. This same pattern shows up in school too. Let's say one kid learns to read just a few months earlier than the others. The teacher notices and praises them. They get put in the gifted group. Now they're getting more attention, harder material, and more encouragement. And guess what? That advantage grows over time because they started slightly ahead. The system favors the ones who get ahead early and keeps rewarding them. And once you start looking for it, you'll see it everywhere. In careers, sports, school, even business. But here's the good news. You don't have to be born in January or be a child prodigy to use this. The takeaway here is leverage what you already have, no matter how small. Even tiny progress, if it's consistent, creates a compounding effect. Start building those reps. Learn in public. Show your work. Even a 1% edge, if you stick with it, becomes unstoppable over time. Lesson 2, opportunity and timing. Alright, now this one right here might just be the most underrated truth about success, and it's probably the most uncomfortable too. Here's the uncomfortable reality Malcolm Gladwell drops in Outliers. Success is often about being in the right place at the right time, and not just random luck like winning the lottery. I'm talking about historical timing, being born in the right decade, growing up during a specific era. Think about Bill Gates. We all know the Microsoft story. Young genius, drops out of Harvard, changes the world, becomes a billionaire. But here's what most people miss. When Gates was just 13 years old, in the late 1960s, he had access to a time-sharing computer terminal at his private school. This was a time when most universities didn't even have computers yet. And get this, he used that computer non-stop. He and his friends would sneak out of bed at night and walk across Seattle in the middle of the night just to code. By the time he was 20, he had already put in thousands of hours of real-world experience before the personal computer revolution even began. And Gates wasn't the only one. Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, Paul Allen, Steve Ballmer, all born between 1953 and 1956. All in their 20s when the PC wave hit, all with early access to the tech. They were smart, yes. They worked hard, absolutely. But they were also perfectly positioned for the biggest tech explosion of the century. Now let's bring it back to you. You might be thinking, cool stories, but I wasn't born into a rich family or next to a computer lab in 1968. But here's the point. You can't control the past, but you can spot the wave before it breaks. Pay attention to where the world is going. What's just starting to bubble up that everyone else is ignoring? AI? Climate tech? That's your opportunity window. Success favors the people who recognize timing and move before it's obvious. Hard work matters, but working hard in the right moment? That's a game changer. Lesson 3. Practice like it matters. Let's talk about one of the most famous and most debated ideas from Outliers, the 10,000-hour rule. You've probably heard of it. It's been quoted, tweeted, turned into Instagram hustle memes. But here's what it actually means, and where people totally misunderstand it. So the idea is simple. To become world-class at something, you need to put in about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Let's bring in some real-world legends here. The Beatles didn't just show up in the 60s and magically become the greatest band ever. They played over 1,200 shows in grimy clubs in Hamburg, Germany, sometimes for 8 hours a night. That's where they learned to perform, experiment, and develop their unique sound, long before anyone knew their names. Or Bill Gates again. Because he had that early access to a computer at 13, he could rack up crazy hours of programming before most kids even knew what coding was. He wasn't just passionate, he was putting in hours before the rest of the world caught up. Now, here's where it gets spicy. This rule has been super controversial. Later studies, like one from Princeton in 2014, found that practice only accounts for about 26% of performance in certain fields. So, 10,000 hours isn't a golden number for everything. But that doesn't mean the rule is useless. It just means we misunderstood it. The real point Gladwell was making is talent is overrated. What really separates the good from the great is the amount of deliberate, focused effort someone puts in over time. So here's the takeaway. You might not be a genius. You might not be naturally gifted. What matters more is, are you practicing like it matters? Are you getting feedback, stretching yourself, tracking your progress? Because if you do that day after day, you might not hit exactly 10,000 hours, but you'll get really freaking good. Lesson 4, IQ versus practical intelligence. All right, quick question. How many times have you heard someone say, "That guy is so smart, I don't get why he isn't successful"? Well, Malcolm Gladwell has a fascinating answer for that in Outliers. So here's the myth most of us grow up with. If you're born with a high IQ, like off the charts kind of smart, you're destined for greatness. Big brain equals big success. Gladwell introduces this idea of practical intelligence. And this hit me like a plot twist in a movie. Because there's this guy, Christopher Langan, maybe the smartest person alive, IQ of 195. He could solve complex problems in seconds, explain deep philosophical theories like he's ordering coffee, and remember everything he read. Literal genius. But he spent most of his adult life working on a horse farm. Meanwhile, there's Robert Oppenheimer, who led the Manhattan Project and helped build the atomic bomb. His IQ was not as high as Langan's, but he was loaded with practical intelligence. It means he knew how to read a room, he knew how to talk to powerful people, get funding, build teams, and navigate complicated systems. That's definitely not something they teach in honors algebra. So here's the real difference. IQ is your ability to solve puzzles, do math, memorize facts. Practical intelligence is knowing how to speak up in a meeting, ask for what you want, negotiate, influence, and adapt. And you need both. Because in the real world, nobody hands you a trophy for being the smartest person in the room. They reward people who know how to use their knowledge, and more importantly, how to navigate the system. And here's the part that matters for all of us. Practical intelligence can be learned. Unlike IQ, which is mostly genetic, practical intelligence is built through experience, parenting, mentorship, environment. It's stuff like learning to ask follow-up questions, speaking confidently to people in authority, or even knowing how to challenge something without sounding like a jerk. If you want long-term success, you need to sharpen your people skills just as much as your technical ones. You need to learn how to advocate for yourself, navigate power structures, and stay adaptable. Lesson 5, Cultural Legacy. Okay, so this part right here might be the most sneaky powerful chapter in Outliers, because it's about the stuff we don't even realize is shaping us. Stuff that's been passed down from our ancestors, baked into our behavior, our work ethic, how we talk, how we listen. It's called your cultural legacy, and it affects way more than you think. Gladwell basically says, you're not just a product of your family, you're a product of your family's history, your community's past, even your country's traditions, going back generations. Let me give you a wild example. Imagine you're a rice farmer in southern China. For centuries, your survival depends on patience, precision, and unbelievable attention to detail. Rice farming isn't like wheat or corn. You don't plant it and leave it. You have to care for it constantly. Water levels, spacing, planting, harvesting, timing, all day, every day, year-round. Now fast forward to today. That culture of hard work, precision, and persistence, it still shows up in classrooms, in test scores, and how kids approach math problems. Asian countries like China, Japan, South Korea, they consistently crush international math tests. Not because their brains are different, but because their cultural legacy rewards effort, not just talent. It's the mindset. If I work harder, I'll get better. Compare that to cultures where we say things like, I'm just not a math person. Totally different vibe, right? Now here's another example that literally involves life or death situations. Gladwell tells this story about Korean Air back in the 1990s. At one point, they had a shockingly high rate of plane crashes. And it wasn't the planes or the training, it was communication. Turns out, in Korean culture, respect for authority is so deeply ingrained that co-pilots were afraid to challenge the captain, even when they saw something going wrong. So instead of saying, "We're low on fuel," they'd say something like, "Sir, perhaps you might want to take a look at the fuel gauge when you have a moment." Meanwhile, they're literally running out of gas. Once Korean Air changed their cockpit communication style to a more direct American-style protocol, crash rates dropped. So what's the big takeaway here? You inherited more than just your eye color or your grandma's nose. You inherited beliefs, habits, patterns of communication. Some of them are superpowers, like resilience, hard work, or respect. But some might be holding you back without you even knowing it. Here's the best part. Once you recognize it, you can work with it. You can keep the strengths and fix what's not serving you. So ask yourself, what did your culture teach you about success, about authority, about failure? And more importantly, are those lessons helping you win or keeping you stuck? Lesson 6. Education and family. Okay, let's talk about something that feels invisible, but might be shaping your entire future without you even knowing. Your family. Not just whether your parents were strict or chill, or if you had a curfew. I'm talking about how your family raised you to think, speak, and move through the world. Malcolm Gladwell breaks this down in a way that honestly hit me hard. He introduces 2 types of parenting styles: concerted cultivation and natural growth. So here's the deal. In middle-class and upper-class families, parents often use this concerted cultivation approach. It sounds fancy, but it just means they actively shape their kids' lives with structure. Music lessons, science camps, sports teams, tutoring, debate clubs, all that good stuff. But it's not just about activities. It's about teaching kids to speak up, negotiate, and ask questions. Like if the coach benches them, they're taught to say, "Hey, what can I improve?" Or if a teacher messes up, they don't just stay quiet, they raise their hand and say, "Actually, I think there's an error here." It's like giving kids a manual for how to handle power and systems. Now contrast that with working class families, where the style is more natural growth. Kids have more freedom, less scheduling, and way less adult interference. They grow up learning independence, but they also learn not to challenge authority. If a doctor says something confusing, they just nod and go home. If a teacher is unfair, they might tell their parents, but they don't feel entitled to push back. See the difference? It's not about how much parents love their kids, it's about how they're preparing them to deal with systems and structures later in life. And those little skills, they snowball. Just like that Matthew effect we talked about earlier. So what's the big takeaway here? Some kids are taught how to talk to authority. Others are taught to obey it. Some kids are told they belong in the room. Others spend years trying to prove it. And it's not about blame. It's about awareness. If you grew up in a family that didn't teach you how to advocate for yourself, that's not your fault. But now that you know how the system works, you can start catching up. Alright, let's zoom out for a second. We've talked about so many different ideas: timing, luck, practice, culture, parenting, even rice farming and airplane crashes. But what does all this actually mean for you? Because let's be honest, it's easy to hear all this and think, cool, so I didn't get born at the right time, in the right place, with the right parents. Great, guess I'm screwed. That's not the point at all. The biggest idea behind Outliers isn't to make you feel powerless. It's to show you how much is happening beneath the surface. Stuff most people never notice. And once you see the game, you can start playing it better. So here's your outlier cheat sheet. Not a blueprint for success, but a lens to understand it smarter. 1. You're not just a product of effort. Success isn't 100% hustle. It's about opportunity, timing, culture, systems, and yes, privilege. But effort still matters. The trick is putting that effort in the right places. 2. Small advantages add up, so give yourself some. Be intentional. Build momentum. Stack your wins. Even small things, better routines, clearer goals, tighter habits, can compound fast. 3. Don't worship talent. Train deliberately. That 10,000-hour rule? Yeah, it's not perfect, but the principle stands. Greatness comes from focused, feedback-driven, uncomfortable practice. Find your reps and start showing up. 4. Know your cultural wiring. Then decide what stays. Are you avoiding conflict because your culture taught you to stay respectful? Cool. But does that help you speak up in a meeting? No? Then time to rewire. 5. Street smarts beat book smarts after a point. Your ability to navigate life, ask the right questions, speak the right language, show up in the right rooms, often matters more than raw IQ. 6. Systems aren't fair, so build your own playbook. Don't wait to be chosen. Don't play by invisible rules. Know how the system works and then create your own lane. 7. You are not broken. You just weren't told the rules, and now you know them. So what's next? You could walk away and think, that was interesting. Or you could take one of these ideas and actually use it. Ask yourself, where am I practicing deliberately, and where am I just going through the motions? Where has my culture shaped me, and do I want to keep that part or upgrade it? Am I waiting for luck, or am I creating leverage? That's how you win long term. Not by being an outlier from birth, but by becoming one on purpose.